gosh, just sleep.
It's a game in English comp.
Yeah.
The game that you lose if you know you're playing?
No, you have to catch each other's snaps and then you throw it back to someone. That's what Miss Rao would do. Miss Rao would
Stomp it out.
Today,
Yeah.
Wednesday, May 14th, we're going to deal with stuff. Let's see, from there, information to cover with you. Final Charger Challenge is coming up a week from yesterday. If you're wanting to do it, it's your last chance ever as a 7th grader. After that, you can't do it again. Honor Society's trip, if you want to do it, get them turned in because they're filling up quickly. If you do group part of Honor Society. And once again, if you have any of my books, make sure you return them. I have a couple get like, oh yeah, I do have them. So make sure you get them to me so I can keep them on the shelves for kids in the future. My birthday's in 4 days. I'm going to turn old years old.
42.
What
is my name?
How old my aunt just turned?
Yes, it was your aunt. This is my dance class. Not you guys yet.
Why do you have deodorant?
Alright.
Hippies.
Hippies, good job. Let's see, in the book so far, this is a quick rewind. We got to. Which character is going to be the one that was in the hippie?
Eminem.
And which one looks like the giant?
Brian.
Brian. And the one that's scary like a lion.
Marl.
And where is it? Who is who's Charlie?
Forgot.
Oh, the guy in the
No.
Bartender.
Hey, you
Nicely
got a
done, Mr.
notification.
Jim. The bartender at the very beginning, and how much money do they owe the bartender?
$3.
And
That amount of money.
who is it that ends up getting the $3 to pay
Mark.
back?
Brian.
Where does Mark get the money? He picks the pocket,
Yeah.
and that's when Mark and Brian and Eminem went to the bowling alley on the way home from the bowling alley. Who they run into?
Shepherd.
There you go, Curly Shepherd and some other random thug, and that's when they did the mugging and stuff like that. And then they're gonna go beat up some random person, and that's when Eminem freaks out like, "You can't beat up people, that's so bad." And then we find out that 2 years have gone by or so since they did the other stuff, and the beating up of the greasers. And then, we find out where Brian and technically Mark's mom is, and she is in the hospital. We find out she had a surgery. They never tell us what the surgery was. They say it was a surgery. And she wants Mark and Brian to go do something. What does she want them to do?
See Mike.
Mr. Big Guy.
See this dude named Mike, who apparently doesn't have any visitors. One of them says yes, one says no. Who says no?
Brian.
Brian. He's like, I'm not going to go see some crazy kid in the hospital. And Mark's like, yeah, I'll want it. So Mark goes and sees him. Where does Brian go instead?
To the mall.
To go check up ladies.
To the snack bar. And he goes down to the snack bar. And when he's down there in the snack bar, who does he run into?
Oh, that girl.
His girlfriend.
Kathy.
Eminem's sister.
Kathy, Eminem's sister. Nicely done. Yes, dear.
What page are we on?
No, we're yet. And so he runs into Eminem's sister, they talk back and forth, he thinks she's kind of a cutie, and he does something he never does, which apparently is get all mumbly and stumbly, and he's like, I'm a player, yo! And then he starts all stuttering, and he's like, but player is supposed to stutter! And so it doesn't work for him real well. And then we got to, and we just got to Mike, and what do we find out happened to Mike?
He
Got beat up. Now, as to why did he get beat up, that's the story we're going to get to today.
And then he's smoking.
He does smoke in the hospital, which is bad.
He's not
And that.
No, I bet Eminem does that.
We're going to get to brass knuckles today.
I know.
We're going to talk about one of these characters has brass knuckles.
Yeah, he
If
knows.
you're unfamiliar with them, it's instead of just punching people, it's this thing that you put your fingers through, and you hold on to it like that, and then when you punch them, it's usually very, very heavy, like a 5 pound, like a pound of sugar, like and you put your hand there and all this metal, and when you punch someone, it hurts a lot more than just your knuckles, because you're carrying this extra weight, and you have all this metal, and they are illegal to have, because there's no point in having them unless you're planning on breaking someone's brain.
Too bad.
Do you have one, Harvey?
My sister has one because she's in college and she
Brass?
has like, what? Well, it's like one of those except it has only two, and it looks like a cat, and there's pointy ears, so if someone comes
So
up.
go in jail.
Yeah, they have
Oh, they're
them
taser
for
ones.
the female defense and stuff like that, so that you guys don't get attacked at night. I've seen little ones like that too, and they're adorable. And so it's the same idea. The big, heavy ones you can't really use because they're just for hurting people. Jordan?
I remember at a store once, like these people were actually selling brass knuckles, and in my in the store, and I actually asked the store, told the store owner, I'm like, are those brass brass knuckles, and he's like, no, they're just belts.
That would work for me.
Huh?
Yes.
Yeah, he's
One of my dad's employees was like driving to get lunch for everyone. Then a guy came up, punched him with brass knuckles, grabbed it, and he went around back because the guy was getting inside the car, grabbed the titanium bat, and the guy ran.
Fun stuff. Well, no more stories about beating people up. And from there, we're going to jump to page 34. And we're going to get back to, we haven't even gotten to the brass knuckles yet, and you guys are already excited about hurting people. On the left-hand side, we're going to find out what happened to our actual Mike.
32.
34.
Oh,
Same 32, but a little bigger. Now, let's see. I'm going to back up just a smidge where it says, I got beat up, he said with a wry smile. I couldn't believe it. I thought he'd been in a car wreck or something. What does the other guy look like? I said finally. It's a long story, I said. You got time for a long story? Sure, I said. I really do like listening to stuff that's happened to other people. I guess that's why I like to read. Well, if it seems like I'm never going to shut up, just tell me. You and Mark are the first people I've talked to in a long time. There ain't much to say to these nurses. I could see that. What can you say to nurses? Well, Mike began, I always had this soft spot for chicks. I was always making like Sir Galahad, opening doors for them and complimenting even the homely ones. And I beat out a lot of guys better looking than me, and they never could figure out why, but it wasn't just a line with me. I guess I'm a sucker. I've been taken a few times, like loaning money to chicks who come on with a sob story, but I'll always believe the best about a girl until I'm proved wrong, which is my own hang-up. That explains the way I acted that night. The gang in me was hanging around the drugstore, and this black chick came in to buy some cigarettes. Me? I just see a nice-looking chick with really beautiful eyes, all black and inky soft. I guess I'm a little funny that way, because they just don't get me all upset. I mean, I can see a black guy and a white chick together, and it sure don't bother me. While most white guys can't stand to see that. Like the gang. The minute she walks in, they get all tensed up, because black anyone, chick or otherwise, it just don't happen to come around much where I live. I guess she worked downtown and got off late and just stopped in on her way to the bus stop. I think she told me that later. I don't remember too good now. So she gets her cigarettes and starts for the door when a couple of guys block her way. Now the gang I hang with is a pretty good bunch of guys. I mean, a lot of heart, only a couple of wise apples in the group. But see, nothing much been happening. They were bored. So they start picking on the chick, calling her Black Beauty and some other choice things. They were really getting rude, and I was feeling sorry for the girl. She kept her eyes down and just said, "Let me by, please?" Real soft-like. The guy started pushing her around. Not enough to hurt her, but enough to scare her plenty. She just gripped her purse with both hands and tensed all over like she was trying to keep from running, which is pretty smart. Running is just an invitation to be chased, and if she got caught, it wouldn't be in a lighted drugstore. The old guy who runs the drugstore disappeared. He was scared silly of the gang. I don't know why. We never done anything to him. Well, when one of the guys grabbed hold of her and really got crude, I got fed up. I went over and said, "Let her go," like I meant it. They all looked at me for a while, like they were trying to make up their minds whether or not to jump me. We don't usually go around beating each other up, but it has happened. They finally decided not to. My big brother, he's got a pretty big rep as a tough guy in our neighborhood. He's in jail now. That's why he don't come to see me. It was his rep, not mine, that stopped him, because I am known as a tough guy. So they turned her loose and went back to reading comics, and I followed the girl outside. She was looking up and down the street, kind of desperate-like, and I knew she'd missed her bus. I said, "Hey, girl, if you missed your bus, I can give you a ride home." She just kept her eyes down. Finally, she said something, but brother, I'm not going to repeat it. I saw then and there she thought I had evil intentions. I don't blame her. Hell, if I'd had to take what she just did, I'd be sore and suspicious too. I said, "Look, I don't want to pick up or anything." And she gave me a funny look. So I added quick, "Not that you're not real cute or anything. I mean, you'll have to stay here another hour to catch the next bus, and I'll be leaving. I don't know what those other guys might do." She saw the logic in that, because it was getting dark. Not too many cops come around that area. It's kind of a deserted street. You know how cops are? There's a million over on the ribbon making sure the nice kids don't kill each other or run each other down, while we can cut each other's throats and They don't give a damn. Finally, she said she'd let me drive her home. I had my old Ford parked in the drugstore parking lot. It was really my brother's car, but she said I could drive it anytime he got busted, which is often. He's a pretty good guy, but if you've got a rep for fighting, somebody's always trying to take you on. The last time that happened, my brother busted a bottle over the guy's head and got charged with assault with a dangerous weapon. He's never used weapons before, but he finally got fed up with the whole routine. It wasn't his first offense, so they sat on him kind of hard. Anyway, we get into my Ford, and I can see the poor kid is still scared. She sits hugging the door on her side like she's going to jump out any second. I got a couple of good looks at her. She was real slender. Looked like she sort of sway in the wind. And her hair was down to her shoulders, and it must have been straightened. She had on a yellow dress and yellow shoes, and she had her straw purse sitting on her lap. She held on to it with one hand and the door handle with the other. She really was cute. I started talking to her about just everything. Would her old lady chew her out because she was late? My old lady did. Man, they never liked anything you did they? But still, sometimes you couldn't get along without them. Did she go to school? I did, but boy, it was really a heck of a place to spend all day. I wanted to drop out, but the old lady said she'd kill me if I did. I kept talking because that's what I do with animals when they're hurt and scared, and pretty soon they get over being scared. I've got a hang-up with animals, too. I could tell she was beginning to calm down a little. At least she let go of the door handle. I even got her to smile once. I forgot what I'd been saying, and then I said, "I'm sorry about what happened to you back there." Suddenly she started to cry. Man, that got me so shook. Nothing gets me shook like chicks crying. Mike stopped here. I gave him another drag on my cigarette. "That's funny," I said. "Chicks crying just bore me." "Go on, Mike. Finish your story." Well, I didn't know what to say to her. I finally said, "Hey, don't cry," which never does any good. She kept on sobbing, and now and then I'd catch a word or two. I got the idea that she was fed up with getting walked all over by white people. I could see that. I get fed up with getting walked over by the fuzz, teachers, my old man, the upper-class kids at school. So I could see that. "Brian, you know that my old man keeps my mother from coming to see me? Said I was a dumb kid for ever getting into this hospital." So anyway, this chick, she tells me about her problems. And she uses some pretty bad language. But nothing I had ever heard before from white chicks. I finally pulled the car over to the curb and reached into my pocket. She sat up straight and got all uptight. "What we stopping for?" she says. And I said, "I thought I had a handkerchief, but I guess I don't." I pulled back on the street. She looked at me for a minute. I kept staring straight ahead, but I could tell she was watching me. She said, "Thank you." I drove her home. She lived way out on the north side where most of the blacks live. You know where? It's a pretty lousy neighborhood, about as bad as mine. As I pulled up in front of her house, I could see a bunch of kids hanging around on her porch and in her yard. "Well, here you are," I said, a little nervous. For somebody who'd been practicing in her mind how to get the door open, she was pretty slow about getting out. That's how it seemed to me, anyway. I think she was tired out from crying so much. Then there were all these black kids around my car. Some big guy opened the girl's door, pulled her out, and said, "What's the matter, Connie? What happened?" You could tell she'd been crying. Then they opened my door and dragged me out. It seemed like there were 100 black faces staring at me. And I guess it was really just about a dozen, but it seemed like 100. I just stood there, backed up against the car. Talk about scared. Man, was I scared. To top it off, the chick had started crying again, so she couldn't talk. Mike paused here for a minute. He was staring off in the distance, and when he started talking again, it was slowly, like he was living the whole thing over again. The big guy came around to my side of the car. "You heard her, white boy?" "No," I said. It didn't sound very loud, so I cleared my throat and said, "No, I didn't." So loud that it sounded like I was shouting. It was real quiet. You could hear somebody's TV from down the street, and a dog barking a block away, and Connie's soft sobbing. I could even hear my heart pounding in my ears. Then the big guy said, really quiet like, "What if we don't believe you?" And I got so scared I was about to cry. And I said, "Ask her, huh? Just ask her." The guy called across the car, "Connie, what you want me to do with this white cat?" And real soft, Her voice was so soft, just like her eyes. She said, "Kill that white boy." And sure enough, they almost did. There was a long silence. I think Mike had forgotten I was listening to him. Then he took a long breath. That's how I got here. I must be a dumb kid, like the old man says. Because I don't hate him, least of all Connie. I mean, I can almost see why she did it. Almost. I shook my head. That's a rotten thing to happen to anybody. It sure is. Sorry. It sure is. Mark's voice came from behind me. He'd been standing in the doorway. I don't know how long. Come on, Brian. Here's your comics. He tossed a couple of monster comics on the bed. As we got into the elevator, Mark said, "I'm inclined to agree with this old man. That is one stupid guy." "You mean it?" I said. I've been thinking about Mike's story, and I could see his point about not hating the people who beat him up. Yeah, I mean it. Man, if anybody ever hurt me like that, I'd hate them for the rest of my life. I didn't think much about that statement then, but later I would. I still do. I think about it and think about it. I think I'm going crazy. One, foreshadowing, again, that last statement between Mark and Brian about the idea of hurting someone if they ever hurt you. The difference between Mark and Brian, Mark is like, "You ever hurt me, I'm going to kill you." And that's Mark's thinking. Brian is much the opposite. Brian is much more of the caring. Even though he's a bit of a player, he's like, "I understand that. You can be nice to people." So that little bit of foreshadow is going to be a little bit different between the two of them. With the story, with what happens to Mike and him getting beat up, I understand it gets confusing. What you have to realize is the level of hatred here. And the idea for the longest time, don't worry about it being a black and white thing. Think about those people who bully you. Think about if you have a group of people that you don't like, who constantly make your life awful, who are constantly making you feel bad about yourself, who constantly push you in the hallways, constantly make fun of you. Gesundheit, dear. If you had a chance to get revenge on them, would you? And that's what it comes down to. And here it just happens to be whites who are putting down blacks. But it could be in between the rich putting down the poor kids, like the socias and the greasers. It could be a matter of just one group of kids at school putting down another group. If you have that chance for revenge, do you take it? And that's where it comes down to at the end. Mike goes, "I understand." He goes, "Even though I didn't necessarily do something to her at that moment, I was part of that group that bullied her. She didn't know if maybe I'd do it some other times. She's like, I understand wanting to get revenge. Revenge is what you want to do." So that's why he says he understands. And that's the same thing with Brian. He's like, "It sucks, but I understand wanting to get revenge on people." So that's where the whole thing comes in. Mickey.
Can I use my use the restroom?
Yeah, go for it. Alright. Now we've covered Mike. Let's get into more of the story. Told you that Mike one's a little bit of an intense story for him getting whooped on like that. And the fact that his own parents won't come visit him because they think he's an idiot. Chapter 3. I've been hunting all over town for a job. I really needed one, but they're not easy to come by if you're 16 years old with no experience, no contacts. I finally hit upon a great idea. I'd asked Charlie for a job. After all, we were friends. He thought I was a smart kid, and having been one himself, he appreciated him. Besides, I figured I really dig working in a bar. Charlie's answer was short and to the point. No. I was sitting at the bar, smoking a cigarette, trying to fight down my anger and disappointment. I've been hitchhiking all over town for a week trying to get a job. "Well, why not?" I asked as soon as I thought I could talk without blowing my stack. "For one thing, you know how often the plainclothes cops stop in? You think they'd let a miner work here? You're lucky you can just come in and sit down. Besides, Brian, it gets rough in here late at night." Yeah, you're a rough kid. They all think that. But you'd better just take my word for it that you're better off someplace else. "Like where? There ain't no jobs in this town. I've been all over. Don't think this crummy joint ain't last on my list." I was mad. Charlie didn't get upset though. He just grinned. "Brian, you're an honest kid in most ways, but you lie like a dog. Take Mark. I wouldn't trust him around anything that wasn't nailed down, but I'd believe anything he said. I'd trust you with my wife if I had one. I trust your actions, but I double-check most of your statements. You just think about it, and I think you'll come up with a reason why you haven't got a job before now. You just think about it." So going back to Mark and Brian, Mark is the thief, and what is it that Brian does?
That's
He's a liar. Again, go back to him being a player, but that's the fact that he's like, I can't trust a word you do. He's like, why am I going to hire someone I can't trust? So that's why he's not going to hire him. Double check my times. I have time. I was too mad to think about it right then, but I promised myself I would later. I listened to everything Charlie said because he was really smart. He'd been a high school dropout, but he could subtract and add in his head quicker than a machine. And he also read almost everything I had, which was quite a bit of reading. Besides, he'd had it even rougher than me when he was a kid. Now he had his own business and was respected by the cops and the rough guys equally. Okay, I said, if you trust me so much, why don't you let me borrow your car Saturday night? This was a shot in the dark. I really never expected Charlie to let me borrow his car, but I'd been thinking about Kathy quite a bit. I'd even called her a couple of times from a payphone since we couldn't pay phone bills anymore. And there was a dance coming up on Saturday night I wanted to go to. I didn't have a car. Okay, Brian, you can borrow my car Saturday. Just bring it back with as much gas in the tank as there was when you took it. I almost fell off the bar stool. You mean it? Really? Charlie gave a short laugh. Yeah, I mean it. But you get into a wreck and I'll swear you stole it. And I don't care if you let Mark drive it either. Any kid who's been hot wiring cars and driving them for as long as he has without an accident, I'll trust with my car. I didn't know how to say thanks. I've always had trouble thanking people. I don't know why, but Charlie just gave me one of those twisted grins of his, like he knew what my problem was and couldn't care less. I'll come by and get it Saturday, I said finally. Charlie said, okay, and I could tell he meant get out of here before I changed my mind, so I got. I wanted to get to a phone and call Kathy. For all I knew, she already had a date. She didn't, thank God, but she did ask me where I was going to get a car. A friend's loaning me his, I said. We may be double dating with Mark. Remember Mark, don't you? Who could forget him, she said. And something gave me a funny feeling. Something about the way she said it. It gave me a funny feeling. Is this a dressy dance? Or a dance? Or what? She asked. Casual, I said. Pants would be okay. It's just at the school gym. Maybe we could go get a Coke afterward. But I was thinking, maybe we'll stop by the park afterward, which is just the way I think. Mark was surprised when I told him who I had a date with. Kathy? Eminem's sister? How old is she? 15 or 16, I guess. You want a double date? Charlie's loaning me his car. I said this casually, like Charlie loaned me his car every day of the week. Mark wasn't fooled. He never was by me. No kidding. How'd you manage that? I just shrugged. The truth was, I still didn't know how I'd managed it. Well, I can't double with you. I already told some guys I'd go stag with them. I thought you would too. Shoot, you haven't taken out a girl since you broke up with Angela Shepard. Yeah, well, if you'd gone with Angela for a while, you'd be sour on girls too. Man, I hate that chick. Too bad she can look so good and be so rotten, Mark said sympathetically. He never once said, I told you so. He tried to tell me a long time ago that Angela was no good, but I hadn't paid any attention. It always seemed like Mark knew the score before I did, but it didn't do me any good. I wouldn't listen to him. I had to find out things for myself. Who all you going with? I asked. We were in the kitchen doing dishes. Mark didn't particularly care for washing dishes, but I just couldn't stand a bunch of dirty dishes piled up in the sink. Terry Jones, Williamson, and Curtis. And I'm glad I'm not going with you. I can't stand that Curtis kid. Come on, Brian, Mark said easily. He's a real nice guy. What'd he ever do to you? He thinks he's so good looking. That whole family's conceited. Mark was trying to hide a grin. He was laughing at me. You know good and well he's not conceited. He can't help it if he's good looking. To tell the truth, I don't think he even knows he is. You're jealous, Brian, because Angela dumped you to make a play for Curtis, and he was smart enough to leave her alone. You can think what you want, I said, but I was almost laughing myself. Mark knew me pretty well. Sometimes that could be irritating, but most of the time it was funny. By the way, Curtis, you should know that last name. Ponyboy, Soda Pop. So this is Ponyboy that they're talking about, this Curtis one. So that's going to play a big role coming up is, who is Brian's ex-girlfriend? Angela Shepard. What do we know about Angela? She likes Ponyboy. She's really attractive, but is she a good person? No. That's going to play a role coming up. So she is no longer going out with Brian, but now she's a crush on Ponyboy. Will Ponyboy go out with her?
No.
No, because he thinks she's nasty. So that's going to play a role here coming up, the fact that Ponyboy won't go out with her. I thought Saturday would never come, but it finally did. I hadn't looked forward to a date in a long time. With Angela, after a while our dates either ended in a makeout session or a fight. Both got boring. I was kind of bothered about what to wear. It was a casual dance, so about anything would be alright, but I was bugged anyway. I was in the bathroom shaving when Mark popped in. He'd been down to Charlie's to pick up the car for me. Hey, 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 he leaned in the doorway grinning at me. Take it all off. You're just jealous because you only have to shave once every 2 weeks. Mark refused to be bugged. You think I want to scrape my face every day? Thanks, but no thanks. I glanced at him just to check out what he was wearing. Mark never paid any attention to how he dressed. I wouldn't be surprised if someday he completely forgot he was supposed to have something on and walked out into the street naked. But somehow he was always dressed right for the occasion. He had on a gold sweatshirt and wheat-colored jeans and tennis shoes. What are you wearing? Mark asked. His voice sounded funny. I shrugged. I don't know yet. Mark turned to leave. I gotta go now. I'm supposed to meet Terry over at his house. I left the keys in Charlie's car. As he was leaving, he called over his shoulder. I found this shirt out in the street. It's lying on the bed if you want to see it. I heard the door slam and the sound of his light running steps on the porch. I finished washing off my face and went into our room. Mark and I shared a bedroom, which was pretty small. We have a small house, and it seemed even smaller with our twin beds. One was against each wall, and that only left a path about 3 feet wide to the closet. I wanted to get a look at this shirt Mark had found out in the street. It was real funny. That shirt happened to be just my size and dark blue, which happens to be a good color for me. For a minute, I wondered whether he'd bought it or stolen it. They were the same thing to Mark, but I decided to forget about it. After all, it's the thought that counts. Mark's clothes were almost all things I had outgrown. I grinned as I buttoned up the shirt. If Mark really cared about clothes, he would steal some. But he didn't. But he knew me well enough to know that I would be thinking about it. If you have 2 friends in your lifetime, you're lucky. If you have one good friend, you're more than lucky. Charlie's car wasn't anything you'd stop and stare at, but it was decent looking. I felt funny when I stopped in front of Kathy's house. I'd always thought of it as Eminem's house, and now I thought of it as Kathy's house. I never paid any attention to Eminem's parents, and I was about to go crazy trying to remember if I'd ever said anything rude or had gotten smart with them, but I couldn't remember. If I had, I hoped they wouldn't remember. Kathy's father opened the door. He said, "Hi, Brian." Friendly enough. I guess as friendly as any father ever greets the kid who's taking out his daughter. So I figured I was safe. Eminem was lying on his stomach on the floor reading a book with the little sister sitting on his back pulling his hair. I stepped over him. When Eminem was reading, you could blow up the house around him and he'd never notice. I'm that way myself. Kathy's mother came from the kitchen wiping her hands on her apron. And in the kitchen, some more little kids were fighting over who was going to rinse and who was going to dry. "Kathy will be ready in a minute," Mrs. Carlson said. "Please sit down, Brian. We haven't seen you in a while." "I've been out looking for a job," I said, sitting down on a rubber duck. "Mark and I run into Eminem every now and then." "How can you tell him and Kathy apart?" Mr. Carlson said dryly. "I can't anymore." "Now, Jim," Mrs. Carlson began nervously, "we agreed not to say any more about Eminem's hair." Even his own family called him Eminem. I tried to remember for a second what his real name was, but I couldn't think of it. In the silence, Kathy screeched, "You give me that brush, you brat!" I stifled a laugh. How have you been doing in school, Brian?" Mrs. Carlson asked. She was pretending she hadn't heard Kathy. This was the usual routine questioning you go through when you have to talk to your date's parents, but I didn't mind. At Angela's house, her mother and her stepfather were always fighting and screaming and throwing things, and sometimes her brothers, Tim and Curly, would get in on it. Then I'd sort of duck flying objects until Angela came out of her room, cussing and throwing things along with the rest of them. So you can see why sitting in the Carlsons' front room answering questions, it wasn't really bothering me. "I'm doing pretty well in school," I answered. "Mostly A's and B's. I decided I wouldn't say anything about flunking chemistry. The teacher and I had a personality conflict. And when I want to cause a teacher trouble, you better believe I can do it." "Eminem is flunking math and gym," Mr. Carlson said, in the same tone he'd used when talking about Eminem's hair. "How anyone can flunk gym is beyond me." I could tell that Eminem was listening to the conversation, but was staring at his book, pretending he wasn't. I understood what he was doing. I've stared at a book, pretending I couldn't hear what was going on around me, too. If people think you can't hear them, they talk as if you couldn't. You can hear some pretty neat stuff that way. It's not as if M&M is an invalid, Mr. Carlson was saying when Kathy came out of her room. I'm ready, she said. She had on a yellow pants outfit and looked real cute on her. I got up. Okay, let's go. On the way out, she gave M&M a friendly kick. When we were in the car, she said, I wish Daddy would leave M&M alone. He's so sensitive. It hurts him for Dad to tease him about his hair or bawl him out for his grades. It seems to me they should be glad about his other grades. His English teacher says M&M has the most brilliant mind she's come across in 5 years of teaching, and be glad he's never gotten into any kind of trouble, instead of picking at him because of his hair. She sighed. I guess since M&M and I are the oldest, we're the closest. I guess you know about them. I forgot, you have a brother too. Yeah, I know about that, I said. Of course, I never heard Mom gripe about anything Mark did. He could get away with things I wouldn't dare try. I never resented Mark for it. I took it as a matter of fact that Mark was different from other people and was therefore treated differently. Kathy sighed. Well, I'm not going to worry about it now. I want to have a good time tonight. She gave me a quick, shy smile. She was sitting close enough for me to put my arm around her, which I did. I was intending to have a good time, too. We could hear the music even before we got there. The band was supposed to be a good one. It was loud enough, which with a dance is at least half the way to being good. I was really proud of having such a cute date, and I was hoping Angela would be there. I wanted to show her up. I had gone with Angela for months, longer than I had ever gone with anyone. I wanted to show her that I had no intention of going back to her. She'd been telling everybody that I would. This was after she had made her big play for this Curtis kid, and he'd acted like he didn't know she was alive. Then she decided she wanted me back. You can imagine how that grabbed me. The dance was going pretty good when we got there. I liked to arrive a little late, when things were swinging. I saw a bunch of people I knew. Kathy knew a lot of people too, but not very well. She hadn't dated before she left for school, and I don't think anyone remembered her. She had been a shy, plain kid. Everybody was staring at us, wondering who she was. I was really feeling great. I liked being the center of attention. Kathy winked at me. She dug it too. I really liked her. I liked her a lot. Hey, Brian! It was Mark. I could tell even before I spotted him across the room, waving at us. Come on, I said. Let's go see Mark. We weaved in and out of the crowd, sometimes stopping to talk. I wasn't too happy when I saw that Mark and Curtis were standing together. Having had one girl ditch me to try for him, I wasn't thrilled with the possibility that it might happen again. Hi, Kathy, Mark greeted her. He'd been drinking, but I doubt that anyone but me could tell. I haven't seen you in a long time. I haven't been here to see you, Kathy answered sensibly. I don't think you know Ponyboy Curtis. This is Kathy Carlson. Hi, Curtis said. He didn't look too happy. I think he'd heard I wasn't crazy about him. He was a little guy, about the same size as Mark, only with a better build. I think he thought I was going to pick a fight with him. I didn't want to. I guess he couldn't help what Angela Shepherd did, and besides, I'd heard he was a pretty good fighter, even though he didn't have the rep of a tough guy. I watched Kathy. She didn't seem interested in him. The first time Angela saw him, her eyes lit up like a tiger's, so I relaxed. Where'd you get the booze? I asked Mark, when Kathy couldn't hear. He grinned. Out in the car, Terry's car. He's got 6 six-packs, and only the 4 of us to drink them. Why don't help yourself? Terry won't mind. He's already passed out in the front seat. Terry had always been a drinker. I decided I'd go out later and have a couple of cans. Maybe I'd get a couple for Kathy. I hoped she wasn't a very heavy drinker. Angela had got pretty expensive with her constant boozing. Kathy and I watched Mark and Curtis as they started toward a group of girls. Mark's a good kid, I said. I'd forgotten how beautiful he is, Kathy said. I know girls who would give their eye teeth for hair that color. I stopped breathing for a second. Kathy was looking at Mark, and I suddenly felt like I'd swallowed a spoonful of red pepper. I felt cold and hot and sick and mad all at once. I only felt it for a second, only for a second, and then it was gone. But sometimes now I wonder how it would be like to feel like that all your life. You know what the crummiest feeling you can have is? To hate the person you love best in the world. 2 things. What emotion is he feeling?
Angry and sad.
Jealous.
Jealousy.
Nicely done. Why is he jealous?
Because he's jealous.
Because the girlfriend likes his father.
He's afraid that because Kathy just said, your best friend's a hottie. He was like, and he gives like that sudden look and goes there. And you have that last thing. You know what the crummiest feeling you can have is? To hate the person you love best in the world? For sure. For sure. For sure. Hi, Brian. The voice was familiar, and I turned around. It was Angela. I just looked at her. She was smiling with that sassy smirk, and I wondered why on earth I'd ever given a darn about her. She was beautiful, little, dark, and even when suddenly all the girls had long, straight hair, hers hung in the middle of her waist in ringlets and curls. It was blue-black and shiny. Maybe all that heavy mass wouldn't look good on just anyone, but Angela had the kind of face that would probably be strikingly beautiful, even if she shaved her head. But since I knew her so well, I could ignore the way she looked. "Hi, Angel," I said carelessly. "You here with Curtis?" "Yes, dear."
Oh, I have to leave, because I'm a helper.
Good. Okay. Right. I meant to rub it in. I think he was the first guy she ever went after and didn't get. Her face contorted for a second, and she called me a few names and flounced off. She wasn't famous for having an even temper. "Who was that?" Kathy asked. I wondered if she was jealous. I hoped so, anyway. "This chick I used to go with," I answered. Kathy glanced indifferently after Angela. "Certainly uses nice language," she remarked. "Real lady." It hit me that Kathy wasn't jealous of Angela at all. Not for her beauty or for her having gone with me. She was the first girl I dated who wasn't scared some other chick would show her up. I didn't know what to make of it. And we're going to stop there before we get to the fight.
I know brass knuckles.
That's not until tomorrow. So I'm going to go ahead and have you, once again, put the books back in the right spots. See from there. Small number on top, big number on bottom.